Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has condemned the coup d'etat that took place in the Republic of Guinea-Conakry on Sunday. ECOWAS also ordered for the immediate and unconditional release of Professor Alpha Conde and all those who were arrested during the process. Details in this report by Mariama Chan.
President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana, who is also the chair of the Authority of ECOWAS Heads of State and Government, condemned the coup that took place in Guinea. The Sunday evening event witnessed heavy gunfire exchange, which was reported near the presidential palace in Conakry. In a media release, the ECOWAS chairperson Nana Akufo-Addo demanded for the immediate and unconditional release of Alpha Conde and all the arrested persons. The West African governments also demanded a return to constitutional order on pain of sanctions, while reaffirming its objection to any unconstitutional political change. President Addo calls on the Guinean Defense and Security Forces to remain in a constitutional posture. Following the gun battles, soldiers who call themselves the National Committee for Reconciliation and Development appeared on TV, claiming to have dissolved the Conde-led government. Conde's third-term presidency had earlier sparked violent and mass protests in the country after a disrupted election in October 2020 and a new constitution in March the same year, which allowed him to sidestep the country's two-term limit. Reporting for iAfrica News, I am Mariama Cham.
Now to discuss more on this is Ibrahim J., researcher and political analyst, joining us live from the Liberian capital, Monrovia. Mr. J, thank you so very much for joining us. The government of Alpha Conde of Guinea-Conakry has been disposed by the country's military. What sort of coup will best describe the situation?
Well, I think the coup is actually belated. We've been expecting some level of political stability or this military coup in Guinea since 2020. As you follow development, Guinea has been rocked by uprisings and instability over the last 2 years due to Alpha Conde's insistence to change the constitution and extend his stay in power beyond the initial two-term constitutional requirement. And so since 2019, Guinea has been rocked by political instability, street violence, protests, and repression from the military. And so this is actually belated. We knew this was coming, and ECOWAS saw this coming as well. The African Union saw this coming. And I think to a larger extent, they refused to engage the Guinean president and ask him or compel him to commit to the ECOWAS Protocol on Democracy and Governance and the African Union Protocol on Democracy and Governance.
Of course, both the African Union and ECOWAS have condemned the military intervention, demanding the release of Conde. What impact will this call make?
Well, certainly, that's the immediate reaction that normally comes from the African Union and ECOWAS. They condemn the military takeover, but they do not engage substantively with the military governments or even with the established so-called democratic governments to deepen the institutions and to avert military takeovers. Previously, we understand that when Conde was changing the constitution, the African Union walked out of that process and refused to observe that process as an observer because they thought it wasn't credible. But then subsequently, they recognized the election of Alpha Conde, and they did not engage with the Guinean authorities and the Guinean stakeholders to find a solution out of the imminent political decay that followed the constitutional change in Guinea that allowed Alpha Conde to extend his stay in power.
So what is the future of Guinea-Conakry now on?
Well, we cannot determine immediately the future. What we know is that Guinea is going to be under military rule over the next few months. And certainly ECOWAS is going to exert some authority by imposing sanctions, economic sanctions, and suspending Guinea from the body. The African Union is certainly going to do the same. And this is going to affect not only the economy of Guinea, but the economy of the entire Mano River Basin. And that includes Liberia and Sierra Leone, countries that are already also struggling economically, and the impact of COVID-19 on their economy has also been very severe. So what we expect to see in the next few months We expect ECOWAS, the Man River Union, the African Union to engage with the military authority to work out a seamless or very smooth transition to civilian democratic rule.
First, the army blamed President Alpha Conde for bad governance, of corruption, among a host of other issues. But is the government the solution for the West African states?
Well, military coup is certainly not the solution, but equally so, bad governance, corruption are not alternative to democratic development or are not alternative to good governance. And so this is where ECOWAS needs to be very proactive, even the African Union. And instead of shielding each other, they should rather compel member states to abide by democratic institutions and constitutional democracy. And so the future for the sub-region, the lesson for the sub-region is that even the African Union, the protocol, the African Union Convention on Democracy and Governance is against the change or amendment of constitutions that prolong the stay of leaders in power. And so, but they have not executed, they have not enforced this provision, but they rather enforce provisions against military coup. And we've learned over the last few years that every African country that attempted changing the constitution to allow leaders to extend their stay beyond the initial 2 terms have been vulnerable to military coup and political instability. We saw this in Burundi in 2015. We've seen this in Mali very recently when the president did not change the constitution to stay in power, but the president allowed some constitutional changes that affected the electoral institutions and allowed cronies to take over key positions in power in the government, including the parliament. And so Guinea, and we've also seen Cote d'Ivoire, where Alassane Ouattara changed the constitution and allow himself to stay in power beyond the initial 2 terms. And Cote d'Ivoire have been run by instability. There have been series of military mutinies from the army. We don't know what might happen in Cote d'Ivoire in the next few months.
Thank you very much, Mr. G, for your time. That was Mr. Ibrahim G, researcher and political analyst, speaking to us live from the Liberian capital, Monrovia. Thank you so much for your time.